Nicholas, you're here.
I am.
This is great. This is like you're a regular now. You're like
This is, yes, very
Fields
surprising to me.
Morton Kondraki. What am I wrong to be making McLaughlin Group references to myself here, Adam? Is that a very small demographic? Yeah, okay,
I'm 100% out on that one. Yes.
Oh, come on, we can't go to McLaughlin Group around here. You know what references can one make? If not to Jack Thurmond, Morton Kondraki, actually Pat Buchanan. And who's the in addition to John McLaughlin? Sorry, I'm making it worse. I'm missing the social cue that this was a reference you should not be making. I'm sorry, I did not ask you to elaborate on this. I asked you to stop, please. So, I know, Nicholas, welcome back. As you can see, nothing has changed. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're still jackasses. But this was a great piece, Nicholas. And so for those who haven't listened to it, we had you in March to talk about adversarial machine learning. I love that episode. That was so good. And it was great to talk about your research. And I think that I think we had Simon Wilson on. We also kind of hit this where we have been trying to hit that pragmatic middle ground with respect to LLMs in particular, and be kind of wary of the potential downsides of this, but also see this as a potential tool. And man, I thought your blog entry just absolutely hit that right in the bullseye. Really hitting that. What was the impetus for writing this, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically this. I feel like most people who I talk to are on one extreme or the other, and are either like, I'm terrified of these things, they're going to end the world, or nothing good has ever come from this. This is only hype. It's the latest thing that the blockchain people moved on to, and they just want to do this to like make a quick buck and move on to whatever the next thing is.
Got to keep selling those GPUs, right?
Right. This is like GameStop. This is like a meme stock.
Yeah.
It's not actually right. This is like real here.
In some sense, like, they're not wrong for some of these people, right? Like, there certainly are a lot of people who are here only for that reason, but I feel like because the most vocal voices are one of these two people, someone who's normal, kind of, it has to decide, like, which of these two futures do I believe in, and it just ends up getting very put off by the whole thing. And I guess what I was trying to do is just say, like, there is a middle ground here. Like, you can both accept that these models are brittle, they don't work in all kinds of situations. There are real harms that may come from them. There are reasons you may not want them to exist in the first place. And yet, they also have some value. And I think it's important to understand this, especially, for as a security person, studying the security of something that no one uses doesn't matter. And like, acknowledging that these things have value is important to be able to say, I do think people will use them in the future, and so we should actually study them more because we believe people actually look at them.
Right. Which is to say, like, look at these things as a tool, and like, what can this tool do? I have to think, if I can just just get this off of my chest here. I really do feel that part of the problem is in the nomenclature, and just the idea of artificial intelligence. Part of its both allure, but its challenge has been it draws us in to anthropomorphize it. And by doing that, we end up in one of these extremes, because it's like, if I'm meeting my replacement, it either needs to be my overlord, or I need to dismiss this thing as a dunce. Like, I can't, you're introducing me to this kind of like this alien intelligence. Like, okay, well, what if we called it something else? Would you be?
Yeah, I agree. But I mean,
well, and actually, I thought it was interesting because I love look, we're clickbaity around here. We admire game respects game when it comes to clickbait, and I like the fact that, like, how I use AI. There's almost like there's a juxtaposition in there, right? Where you're on the one hand using this anthropomorphized term, on the other hand, like, really indicating that you're using it as a tool, and then really throughout the piece you refer to LLMs, which I think is great.
Yeah, I put a footnote at the first time I used the word AI somewhere, where I said something essentially like, I very intentionally used the word in the title because I wanted people who like AI to read this and like are excited by this, and I also wanted people who hate the word to rage click on it and be like,
Right.
what is this idiot going to tell me? And so like let's like read this and hopefully get both of these people to at least look at the thing.
I swear I did not read that footnote before making that comment, but the footnote is exactly. I love the footnote. You're like, look, this is not. I'm doing it for marketing, okay?
Yes.
I'm doing it for the SEO. I'm doing it for the clickbait. And again, we would be complete hypocrites if we've done this many a time. And I also love that you got AI in kind of air quotes there. I mean, man, there's so much to love about this. I do kind of almost open with one of your conclusions because Adam, I think this kind of reminds me of when people are evaluating, and again, I'm going to anthropomorphize it here, so I apologize for the policing mind is becoming the criminal mind. but when you interviews go sideways when you are asking like how could this person fail as opposed to how could they succeed. And I love the fact that you're like evaluate what LLMs can do rather than what they can't. Like it's too easy to focus on what they can't do, and for any tool you can focus on what it can't do. It's not interesting.
So, Nicholas, that was such a great line, and I that resonated for me as well, Brian. And in particular, you kind of followed up with some other examples. We're saying, this LLM can't even add to 2-digit numbers. It's like, yeah, well, you humans can't like divide 64-bit numbers in your head either. So you're not good at everything yourself.
Yeah,
I thought it was a great imperative to see what the value for what it is.
I think it's important for research to look at what models can't do and ask how could we improve them. Like I understand the value. Like, why would someone write a paper that says this? I mean, it makes sense. You want the things to be better, so let's measure what they can't do. But I just feel like online, there's so many people who, like, even on this was on Hacker News, and there was some people who were like, but the model can't tell me whether 0.8 or 0.11 is bigger. And I'm like, when was the last time that you honestly needed to ask a language model if 0.8 was bigger than 0.11? Like
this toothbrush can't even drive a nail.
I know, yeah. And I understand, it's surprising to you that the model can't do this thing that humans see as trivial.
Yeah.
But tools have uses, and you figure out what the tool is useful for, and if it can solve your problem, I don't care if it can't do something else. And it's kind of wild to me, 10 years ago, machine learning could do nothing. And right. I think the problem with part of the marketing of language models and everything is because now people expect they can do everything. So when they point out something that it can't do, they're surprised. Which I don't know, from my perspective, it's amazing they can do anything. And so pointing out the things they can do is kind of impressive. But totally. Yeah, this is sort of the...
Right. Your example of writing a poem only with letters that start with the letter A, which is another one, right, where you say the fact that it can even give it a shot is right. Radically impressive.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think it's just an important thing to keep in mind. And I don't want to dismiss this, but yeah.
It's such a lazy critique as well to say, it can't do these seemingly trivial things, because I think there are deeper critiques.
Yes,
around hallucination or pointing you in the wrong direction or giving you things that are so plausibly true. And one of the questions I had for you, Nicholas, have you had instances where you felt like it wasted your time? Because you gave so many terrific examples of it saving you time. And I agree. Like some of these things where you say, well, that's a critique could be, well, that's easy. It's like, yeah, sure, it's easy. It would only take me an hour or two, but it took me 2 minutes. So that was really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time where it tells you here's the answer and it's just wrong. And this is again a case where, how many times have you searched for some error message and hit some Stack Overflow thread and you found the person who suggested the answer and it's accepted, and then you later realize no, that person was absolutely incorrect. There was nothing to do with whatever the error message was. Someone just decided I understand how things can be incorrect on the internet. This is not news to me. And so,
have you seen Adam Theo Schlossnagel's closing plenary from the 2011 surge? This is one of my favorite talks of all time.
No, I don't think so.
All right, so Theo was at Surge, which is this great conference that he ran for a couple of years, then just got too much, just stopped doing it. But Surge was great, and so he is going to give the closing plenary. But he had no idea what he was going to talk about. And meanwhile, he's chewing my ear off on how like miserable his previous 3 days had been. And I'm like, Theo, this is your closing plenary. Like right now, you're giving me your closing plenary. So you just need to go up on stage and just like give that. And that's what he did. And it was great. And it is so funny. And Nicholas, just to your point, he got down he wasted wasted a day of hard intellectual labor because he found a fix for his problem on the internet, and someone had replied, "That works for me, thanks." He's like, okay, so clearly like this is the right fix. It actually was the wrong fix, and he came to the conclusion that like whatever asshole said that works for me, thanks, is just wrong. And it's like, if you really wanted to waste humanity's time, and maybe this is what will happen when the singularity has actually arrived, the bots are going to run around finding incorrect fixes and replying to them, being like, that exactly fixed my Linux audio problem. Thank you. And meanwhile, so yeah, no, exactly. You can easily get this stuff. And I think and Adam, that's a great question. And I guess, Nicholas, my follow-up would be, and I think you kind of answered it, when it is pointing you in the wrong direction, how far down that path did you go? Because like Theo went really far down that path because he was convinced that he was wrong. Whereas I feel like when it points me in the wrong direction, it's like, okay, that's pretty clearly wrong. Like that's fine. I'm not going to. But Nicholas, what's your experience? Like, how often have you ended up down
that? I think for the most part, like I never really trust the thing very much. You ask for what you think it should do, and it gives you some instructions, and if they sound plausible and then they're like the kind of thing you might find online, then I'll try it. But maybe 1 or 2, 3 turns down the path, if it ends up that it's not solving the problem, I just move on to whatever. I'll go back to searching the internet for whatever random thing I'm looking for is, or just debug the problem myself, or whatever the case may be. Like there may be a possible future in which going 4 or 5, 10 rounds deep with these things, telling them to fix problems, will make them be actually fixed. But for right now, if it hasn't figured it out in 1 or 2 rounds, I just give up on it and just go back to something else.
And one of the pieces of advice you had given was, if it gives you an answer, you said, for example, to a compiler error, and you try it, you say that didn't work, it gives you a different answer. And that I've had that experience too, where you say, the other day I was looking for a Rust crate that did a particular thing, and I described the thing, and it said, this Rust crate will do it. Here's some example code. And I typed in the code, did something completely different. Like did not do what it described at all. And I just said, well, that didn't work. And then it's amazing how quickly it folds, saying,
it totally does.
Oh, I'm sorry. Like that was my mistake. Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, and this happens quite a lot. And if it gets it right in the first or second try, then I think it's reasonable. But I found for the current generation of things that it won't go. And so I feel like you could easily, if you were to just trust this thing blindly, you could end up in some truly terrible cycles. I'm from some research stuff, just like asking models to self-correct themselves like many, many, many times deep, and sometimes they can just keep on going and finding all kinds of things that if you tell them it was wrong, it's always going to be very sorry. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It turns out that I'm going to do it this other way. It just like rewrites the entire program in a completely new way, not fixing any of the problems that were actually problems, and just tries to do something entirely different. And like you could just keep saying wrong, and it will continue to be sorry the whole way through and never fix anything. And so I feel like 1 or 2 times, and I just stop.
It is deeply apologetic, which I actually really appreciate. The other thing that I'm not even sure if this may just this may be a placebo effect. I love to ask it if I can do what I'm about to do before I ask it to do it. Do you do this, Adam? Like,
oh yeah, I like to. I say, hey, I'm using this thing. Are you familiar with this thing? And it's like, yes, I'm. Just ask your question, idiot.
It's always so enthusiastic. It's like, oh, I would love to help you do this. Yes, yes. Upload the image for me right now. That's great. I would love to do that. Can you upload the PDF. Just do that, and I'll help you. It's like, oh, great. I just like I like the kind of the please and thank you, and it's very apologetic. So I guess that anthropomorphization I like.
Yeah. For something raised on the internet, it is amazingly polite.
Well, it was raised on the internet, but then it was sent away to a military academy. I mean, it was very strictly disciplined after. I mean, if Microsoft Tay was these LLMs in their preteen years, they were definitely sent upstate for a while, and they've emerged
rehabilitated,
very or at least polite.
That's right.
At least apologetic when they send you to your death. So let's go through some of these examples, because the other thing I have to say, Nicholas, that I really loved about this is that you uploaded Well, I'm curious if these are more or less your entire transcripts, but it was really great because I feel like that we don't see as much where, people kind of say like, I built this using an LLM, but you don't get to think, okay, what was all the give and take? What were the follow-up questions? What did all of that dialogue look like? And is this pretty, how much editing did you do before you
Yeah, this is
really?
just,
That's amazing.
yeah. So I never. So I also did not intend for anyone to ever see these. Like I was not like.
Right.
I don't think this far ahead. I was not like last year being like, let me type some chats to these models so that in a year I can, release them to the world and sort of make these models look artificially good or bad. Like these are like things that I wanted to get solved, and I was like, how I use the thing, and then just posted completely unedited versions of these things. I will say that there are some that I did not release because they solved problems for me, but I was maybe 10% less kosher than I should have been, and have like IP addresses of internal servers or something like that. I maybe we don't want to be revealing to the internet. But all of the things that I did post are unedited.
That's great. And then what LLM are you using here? Not that it is particularly.
Yeah, so most of these are with GPT-4, but Claude 3.5, Sonnet has recently also been really, really good. And yeah, I basically try to use whatever I have. I try to use all of them. They're all high quality. I feel like on the margin they now, like if you look at like the current state of the art, like the Meta, Facebook, Llama 3.1405 billion, Gemini 1.5, Claude 3.5, Sonnet, and GPT-4o are like within percentage points depending on how you benchmark which one's better, but like they're all pretty good.
Yeah, that's amazing, which is great. That's amazing. What a luxury that we all have, that we are able to.
Yes.
It really is extraordinary, and some of these transcripts are really long and interesting in terms of like, as you are kind of, and honestly, pretty amazing that you're able to kind of fine tune the things that it's giving you without it completely losing its mind. It was really.
Yeah, no, this is like the thing I think is really surprising to me, where like it'll give you a thing and I'll just be like, that's great, but like I realized I told you something that like was actually wrong. Like I didn't want that. I wanted something different. And you don't even have to like be super explicit with them. You just like make this more like this other thing. And it's like, okay. And if it turns out it didn't do it right, then you just tell it like, oops, my bad. I actually wanted this other thing.
Well, that's a good point, because I feel like, and we again, it's easy to dwell on the things that it gets wrong. Adam, I definitely have had things where I have, like, I'll ask it a question and I'm like, that's a terrible question, Bryan. Like it can't answer that. Like, that's a dumbass question. And then it's like, oh my God, it actually did. Like I did not give it enough information to give me a good answer, and it gave me a good answer anyway. Like there've definitely been moments like that have been really, quite
same. Where I'm like, how could I no human would infer context from the blather I just gave this thing. Like how, what am I, what kind of optimistic, but yeah, it figures it out.
Why I really like it is when often like framing a good question is like hard. Especially like finding, like this is a skill like I think most people don't remember that they had to learn, was like how to look for something on the internet. Is like most of us can just like do this, but like it's sort of like you're playing this weird game of like, what are the keywords that the answer is going to have? Like most people are pretty good at like finding these things now, but like being able to just be in the middle of a problem and just be like, here's the thing, it's not working, fix it for me, or like whatever, and just like getting a competent answer back without having to take your mind away from the task you're solving, I find really valuable, because every time you have to like go look something up, it like breaks your flow just a little bit, and just like every little bit of barrier you can reduce here is just very valuable for me.
Though that's a very good point, because that's like a lot of what you're doing here is kind of, we always talk about the friction in software development, and that's what you're really hitting over and over again is just reducing that coefficient of friction and making things where on stuff you're like, oh God, I got to ramp up on this new framework, or I'm getting this error message, and just being able to reduce that friction and allow you to just go faster, which is what you've kind of done over and over.
Definitely, and like there are lots of things where like a couple of the examples I put here are things I like just I would not have built if not for the ability to use these things. Like okay, so there's one of the examples I last year made some like quiz thing of like, guess how well GPT-4 can solve these questions. And I did that again because I thought at the time people were wildly underestimating the capabilities of models. And it's like it's a web app. It like has a quiz where like you sort of drag a slider. Do you think it's going to get it right, yes or no? And you have a next button. Like, this is not interesting. Like, this is not fun programming. Like, HTML with like these kinds of things. But it has to get done. Like, I want to do the quiz, but like I have to write, a back end in some programming language. I have to have a front end that like looks passable for a person. I have to like do all these things, and like I don't want to spend my time doing all of that. I want to do the 10%, which is the interesting piece, which is like, let's demonstrate some interesting capabilities of these models to people, and letting the model take away all of the stuff that would have been painful for me. Like the last time I learned a new thing on the internet was like jQuery and like the box model, and being told like, like don't use tables, use divs. Like I'm like very well out of date on this thing. Like I don't want to have to learn the new thing. Just like tell me how to do it, and like that's not important to me right now. The important thing is something else. Just make the rest of it work for me.
That's right. And it's kind of like I also feel like, and you got a lot of examples like this. And you talk about like for boring tasks or things, or to automate things where it's like, look, realistically, I'm just going to leave if you didn't exist, large language model didn't exist, this would just be painful or worse or absent. It's not like the world wouldn't stop. But boy, if you can do this for me, great. I mean, I actually do want to do this. But it's just something that is like, as you say, it's like it's boring. And I also feel like on a lot of that stuff where like, look, I'm doing this because I know that yes, I can go figure out this framework. I could go, as you said, like back in the day, you'd buy the O'Reilly book and have it open on your lap and type in the examples. And yes, if I wanted to do this framework for a living, that's what I would do. But actually, I just want to do this thing to prove some other point.
I would still do that today, right? Like, if I want to learn some real thing, I would get the book and actually read it and like actually learn the thing. But like, there are so many things that you want to do that like, this is like just something off the path that just you need to get done in order to have the thing be solved for you. And
I also find that it's like GPT these large language models can often take something that is well documented and give you better narrative around it. Like I've definitely used LLMs to write GNU plot. GNU plot is very well documented, but documentation is a little idiosyncratic.
Yes, all of my plotting now for like, no, except for like the final plots that I put into papers, but like almost all of like the intermediate plots for things are definitely generated by these things, because like you're like, just like, I want this thing in red, I want this thing in blue, just like make the plot for me. I don't need to know if like is ds dot size, is it like 0.1 or should I be doing 1? Like I don't really remember. I guess I could look it up if this is like in EM or PX, but like just like make the plot for me, and then I will come back and tell you what you got wrong and fix it.
And meanwhile, a listener's being like, "You guys are not about to do another episode on GNU plot, are you? You've already done one complete episode on GNU plot. You like
surprise! It's a GNU plot episode."
It turns out even you thought every episode was about LLMs. Actually, every episode is ultimately about GNU plot. But and I also think that when you're dealing with that kind of tedium, you are also most likely to be distracted. I think that we live in an age where there's so much distraction all the time. I think it's one of the just challenges that we have with modernity, that the fact that we're all working from basically a television set and, there's plenty to be distracted by on the internet and everything else. And when you're doing something tedious, it can require just like a lot more energy, but not in kind of an uplifting way. And so when you've got something that can actually like really help just jumpstart you on that, you just are able to go so much faster.
Yeah, the blank page problem is just very hard. Of like, you have this thing, you need it to go, and like it's going to be painful, and like you just don't want to do it. But if you have something that we can just like get things started and like get things going for you, I just find it so much easier to get moving with these things.
Yeah, that was a great point you made. That blank page problem. Not just taking the tutorial or the quick start or whatever, but the next like 3 steps in the direction that you're trying to go. And as you said, like how to program, you can kind of take it from there. but getting a little more pointed in the direction you actually want to go.
Well, Adam, I find that this when I'm using like a new crate, I mean, I find that the examples that GPT will give me for that crate are often much better than the examples in the crate's documentation.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I use it a bunch with Clap. I don't know if you use Clap much, but the Rust crate for building CLIs with arguments and stuff like that. So what I'm trying to do, weirdo stuff like making various arguments depend on other ones and different combinations being invalid. I find it just knocks it out for me. It's so much easier.
And it was your question of do you use Clap? Was that a question to Nicholas? Was that like a question to the chat, or was that an actual question to me?
I don't know why I asked you.
I mean, I feel like I'm like a Clap OG at this point.
I don't know why. Why did I say that? Of course you use Clap.
Yeah,
you're all Clap. All Clap all day.
I'm all Clap all day. I mean, I've been using Clap for so long that I was using Clap before GPT was available, and it's great to be able to use an LLM for Clap because there's a lot of interesting options you can put on there. So yeah, I'm all in Clap. Yeah. On a couple of these, one question actually one that you did not have on here that I have do you use LLMs at all to and I guess you do mention this because you talk about to simplify code, but as code review to just like, hey, could you take a look at this code and give me your comments on it?
Yeah, this would be okay. So maybe a little bit. So I write research code, which means the code that I write usually does not need to run in 6 months. So this is, I guess, one of the big caveats of like everything and like what I'm saying is like, the things that I'm doing are usually things that are one-offs that like need to work for a small amount of time, and then the few things that I'm going to release publicly, like I have time to commit to make these things better. So yeah, I tend to not do this. Another really good example of this was writing test cases. Like a lot of people really like these things for just like half of all test cases are the same. Past the empty string, past the thing that's like, that almost out of bounds, like whatever, these kinds of things that like these models are great at doing that, but I don't write test cases, and so that's not a thing that
not a problem
I have used these for. But maybe I should. Maybe it would be better. Like maybe research code would be better if everyone just used these things to automate writing test cases for them. But at the moment, that's not a thing that I do.
So, which of these surprised you the most? And actually, may I put my thumb on the scale. The one where you uploaded 500 lines of C++ and it simplified it was mind-blowing to me.
I did not expect. Okay, maybe there's two that really sort of I did not expect would work. This one was one of the most surprising ones to me. Yeah, no. So what I did for this one, for people who haven't read it, is there's a program called Golly. It simulates the game of life. I like the game of life. I wanted to be able to call into Golly, which is C++, from within Python. And so Golly has a command line interface, and so I just took the entire 600 lines of Golly or whatever it was, the CLI, and just said, like, here's the thing. I want to be able to run this one function that would be called from this particular command line arguments. Like, get rid of the rest of it. Just, like, make it that. And it, like, gave me basically perfectly running code that, like, did the thing. Which, I very much did not expect that this would work. But I guess the thing that I've become pretty used to doing is like, let me just take a task that I don't know if it's going to work at all and just give it to the model and hope. Like, and if it gives me the answer, it's great. I've saved myself 2 hours. If it doesn't work, fine. Like I accept the fact that these things are imperfect, and I will do it myself.
Right. You wasted 30 seconds.
Yeah. And then
the one that blew my mind was when you typed in a bunch of assembly code and said, write some Python that corresponds to this assembly.
Yeah, that was for some other project where some people didn't want to release the code for some defense that they had written. So they had a compiled Python binary, but they didn't release the source code. Python is bytecodes. It's like, it's not that hard to go from Python bytecode to Python source. Like it's obnoxious, but like it's not like that hard. And that one, I'll admit, I had gotten halfway through doing it myself. Like I had gone through, I don't know, like several hundred lines of code, a couple of files before I was like, why am I doing this? Like at first I tried to take an off-the-shelf decompiler that will like do it for me automatically, and it did one or two files. But like the decompiler was for Python 3.7, and I had Python 3.9.
Like, oh my god, I always wanted to guess that. I'm like, the decompiler is going to have some dependency that is completely inconsistent with it. It's like, oh my god,
right? Exactly.
Right, of course.
And so I just I copied the disassembled, the assembled, like the Python bytecode, and said, here's the thing. Just tell me what the function is. and it basically got it perfectly. I recently actually did this for I have some complicated row reduced echelon form thing that I just as a test. I just some math thing that it was 300 something opcodes, and it can do that. Like the most recent Claude 3.5 Sonnet can even do that one, which is really impressive. Like on one hand, it's really impressive. On the other hand, going from Python bytecode to Python source is not hard. Like if I gave you the thing, you could do it. It's mostly a matter of keeping track of where are the jumps and which variables are currently on the stack and all these kinds of things. And just, it's not hard, but it's just painful and annoying to do. Not the kind of thing you want to be spending your time doing, but yeah, model can automate these kinds of tasks for you just great. And I really like them for these kinds of things.
I think where I was impressed with that one was that it stayed on task and didn't hallucinate some incorrect answer. That's one where it felt like context was required, and it might not, it might give you something plausible but wrong. So I was pretty impressed that it nailed it.
Yeah, no, and to be fair, sometimes it is wrong, but if you run, anyone who's run any decompiler understands that most decompilers work in one of two ways. Either the decompiler gives you a technically correct but is entirely useless decompilation, which converts the assembly jump to a C goto, and just does this instruction by instruction as variable X gets variable Y plus Z, go to label 5.
Look, if I wanted assembly, I would have left it in assembly.
Exactly. Or there are the disassemblers that try and give you reasonable source code, and oftentimes these are just not sound. The decompiler tries to do the right thing. It does what best as it can, but it may not be completely sound. And oftentimes the reason why I'm decompiling this as a security person is not because I need the thing to be perfect. It's because I want to find the vulnerability in the thing, and I don't want to read the assembly. I want to read something that is roughly human interpretable. And so I'll decompile it, and if it turns out that it has a couple of minor bugs, that's fine, I'll fix it. But what I want is to be able to read the thing to know what it's doing, so I can figure out where I might want to look further. And in particular, I want to be able to discard as much of the code as being irrelevant as possible, and focus only on the pieces that are relevant. And being able to get a high level idea of what everything is that's going on is very, very nice.
Yeah, that's amazing. So another question I've got for you is, part of the reason that these LLMs are great at these tasks is because there's a lot of information it can consume out there on the internet that is germane to Python and Python bytecode, or what C++ and so on. When people are developing software systems, because one of the kind of the questions I've had for myself is, does this make documentation? We think that documentation is kind of less important in this world, but maybe documentation is actually more important in this world to give future LLMs something canonical that they can go actually interpret. And I mean, what's your any kind of read on that?
No, I definitely agree. I think this is one of these cases where this might be a case where more documentation might be even better, because if you can give as much help to the model as possible to be able to let it help you do these things, that might be great. I mean, the other people have pointed out other potential problems of these models of suppose that someone creates a really amazing package, next year, but no one uses it. And suppose that because no one uses it, there's not a bunch of really great examples of it online. And so the models don't learn how to use this package really well because no one's using it. You might end up in a world where this thing is great, it exists. In a normal world, people might be using it. But if everyone is relying on these models to use only the things that are popular, you might be able to have things which are legitimately very, very great and better than everything else that exists, but just the models aren't good, therefore people don't use it, therefore there's no training data, therefore the models don't use it, therefore you get in this loop, and it might become very hard to become to be able to release these kinds of things that are new, that are actually much better, that people don't use because of this reason. So I don't know. I think there's
do people rely on LLMs, and then it's harder to break through because the LLMs can't be helpful. That's interesting.
Okay, but no, you know what I got to say? I think that we have already had that problem. We've had that problem for 2 decades plus more, where people adopt something because other people are using it, not based on its own merits. I mean, how many times have we heard I'd love to use Lumos, but I also want to be able to Google my stack trace, and I can do that with Linux.
Totally.
And
agreed that we have the hurdle. It just may be raising that hurdle.
Well, but what I think is amazing is actually that for because Nicholas, we've got our own operating system in a Lumos drive system, Helios, and Adam, I can't remember if we've talked about it here or not, but have you asked GPT a Lumos-based questions? It's amazing. I mean, it's really it's extraordinary. It's very good.
Oh, good.
And it's like that's not because there's necessarily a ton of stuff on the internet about it. In fact, there's probably more. And so but the stuff that's out there is actually much more canonical, and there's much less just kind of like randos out there. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting that I think it's going to make it easier to adopt some of these platforms on their merits. So I actually wonder if it's actually going to be better for smaller platforms.
Oh yeah, no, this could be very much true too. Like, it's hard to predict which way these things are going to win out. I think there's very legitimate arguments that it might be, someone writes a new framework, they release really good documentation for it, the model's trained on the framework training data of how it works, and all of a sudden it's great at it, and now all of a sudden everyone can use this new thing because it's and they don't have to learn how to do it themselves, and they can sort of get used to it piece by piece. Like, I think that's also entirely possible. I feel like lots of people in this space have one thing that they believe to be true, and then they see the evidence to the contrary, and they refuse to change their mind. And I just sort of want people to accept that, like, either of these two things may happen. We don't know yet, and I would like to see evidence towards one or the other.
Totally, yeah. It is going to be. I mean, I think it will be. It's just going to be interesting because I think it is going to change things, but it's not clear to me that it's going to change them for the worst.
Maybe better, maybe worse.
So, P5 Commit, you joined us up here. Do you have a question for Nicholas or a comment on your own usage?
Yes. Since everybody is using so many LLMs for programming, how do we know we're writing the right thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, so that's a great question, and I think that this kind of goes to Adam's question at the top. Like, how do you know that it's pointing you the right way? And Nicholas, I don't want to speak for you, but I think for a lot of these tasks that you're looking for it to do, it's kind of pretty clear if it's completely wrong off the jump, and two, it's like actually if it's totally wrong, as long as as long as it doesn't waste a day of my time. It's actually it's fine. I can actually I don't know, Nicholas, what would be your answer to that?
No, I'd say the same thing. Yeah, like either it solves it for me, and it's you can just check if it's right. And like lots of things are just like there's so many things that are easier to verify than write yourself. Where like you can sort of like look at the code and be like, yeah, like that's directionally correct. Like maybe there's a bug, maybe there's missing off by one or whatever. But like I'll figure it out. Like I can like check the output, especially for like things where the checking the output is easy. Where like it's like creating an HTML page for you or something. You look at the page. Does it have the thing that I want in the right location? Yes. Okay, great. Like I'm done. Like this is like one of these cases where I'm using it. And like if it's going to be for some case where I'm writing it for like some critical piece of logic where if it's wrong in some subtle way, then everything's going to fail. Like I won't ask it to do that. Like you have a choice to use the thing or not use the thing, as the case may be.
Well, and this is, I do wonder if this is one of these kind of interesting consequences because you're asking it to rewrite things in different languages and so on. Boy, when you ask it to rewrite it in Rust, you get a lot more compile time guarantees that you have something that's approaching correctness. I would be much more nervous about deploying JavaScript that was written by an LLM because it's so easy to have an issue that's kind of that's lurking in the weeds that we won't find until we execute that code. With Rust, you're going to find that a lot earlier. And I wonder if that's not going to, one of the changes that this could bring is more. I mean, certainly if you are interested in adopting Rust, you should absolutely be whipping out these LLMs to help you translate programs. I'm actually
certainly like this has been great. I started off by asking them to write C because they weren't quite good enough at Rust, and have switched to Rust. Like so a lot of things that I write, like here's another thing I do a bunch. Yeah, one of the things I mentioned was I have some Python program. It would give me the answer correctly. It might take an hour or two to run because I have like half a terabyte of data to process, but like I'm not going to spend my time fixing it because my program's going to run exactly once. So like I'll hit go and I'll go do something else. But now I can just I can write my Python program, copy it to the model. Please rewrite in Rust, and it'll just give me the Rust, which is whatever 1,000 times faster because basically just a for loop. And,
yeah, interesting.
And like it compiles, and it's especially great is like I can ask it for the machines that I work on often are like pretty beefy. Like for some things that I'm doing, I have like a terabyte of RAM and like 196 cores, and they're the kinds of things where like doing it single threaded like loses you a factor of 200 in performance. And there is absolutely no way that I'm going to ask this thing to write a parallel C implementation. Because if there's a race condition, like I am never going to catch this. But if I ask it to write it in Rust, like there's not going to be a race condition. it's gonna be correct. Like either it won't compile or it's right.
Right.
And like this is amazing to be able to have this sort of not like complete guarantee, because it's possible to shoot yourself in the foot, but like the number of cases where something actually could go wrong is like so much smaller.
Well, it's a lot harder, and especially if it's not going to give you. I mean, if it starts giving you a bunch of unsafe Rust, that would be.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. But at least then like you look at the output, and it's like unsafe.
Oh my God.
Entire program. Like
it's like okay,
nice try. No thanks.
Back to military school for you until you come back with less unsafe Rust. But yeah, I mean, if you've got like purely safe Rust, and then also like, okay, so you get some compile time message that you may or may not understand. You've got something you can iterate back. Being, okay, I tried to do this thing, and here's the error I got. Can you explain this error message, or can you give me more context about it? I mean, there's just so much opportunity to kind of understand what it is actually trying to do, and then get some actual confidence in it.
Nicholas, for all the stuff you're doing, are you kind of pasting it into one window, looking at the response, copy and pasting another? Are you using it integrated into, I think you said Emacs was your editor of preference?
Yeah, I'm one of those people.
No,
so
I used to be one of you too.
You're in a safe place. Welcome.
Okay.
We were in the spirit of world peace. We welcome Emacs users.
Yeah, so for most of these ones, this is actually being pasted into an editor because I wanted to have things that I put online that so there's two reasons. One is I wanted to be able to have proof that I actually asked a model and didn't edit the outputs. So all of the things that I did have a link to the LLM that it came from, where like you can see on like their servers, I actually did run it like this. So that's half of the reason. And the other half the reason is for starting new projects, I oftentimes will start from the editor just to talk to the thing for a little bit. But I do have, I'm an Emacs person. I have my own sort of set of macros that I can type to like query the model interactively in my editor. But like those queries are like very hard to talk about with other people, because it's like I'll highlight like 5 lines of my code and be like, make this change. And it's very hard to show someone that.
Right.
It's much easier to show someone, here's this sort of like thing that I did from scratch. Here's why you can look at it and like understand what I'm doing, and not just be like, make these 5 lines of code different.
Yeah. I confess I'm asking because I'm a bit LLM curious in this regard. There's some of my colleagues, and I've seen folks having it real integrated into their editor, and I'm very tempted. So just seeing if you had any tips there.
Yeah, no, I like it. One of the things I think I mentioned here is like, so I have it. So I think I have 3 different modes of the way that I have it set up for Emacs. One is I have one key command that will which will look at the entire file, and I can just ask something about the file and just go to a conversation. One of them is I can do it with the current selection, so I can select something and it will replace the selection with whatever the output of the model is. So I use this a lot, being like, here's the thing, it does this, like, oops, rewrite, please make this change. And the final one is one that will look at the entire Emacs window and just like feed whatever I currently see, which is great for when you hit an error, where like, like something has gone wrong. Like I already have open the relevant code and the error message. Just like, look at everything. Like I'm not going to reformat it. Just like, here's everything I see. Like, please fix. And it will just like go and do this. And yeah, I like this. I think it's useful for me. Again, on the reducing friction side, maybe it's wrong, but like I oftentimes will just like ask for the answer and I'll try and start looking, and then I can go skim what the model tells me, and maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. It's probably wrong more often than not in these cases where like you have some complicated error. But I feel like part of the reason why I do this is because currently these models are still getting better, with every new release, and I want to be in the habit of if it's giving you the correct answer every time that you're asking it, it means you're not asking it to do enough things. And so I want to be in the habit of sort of being surprised on occasion, so I know where the limits fall. But yeah,
that is good guidance. And also, all right, so you've got hotkeys to allow it to. Did you have an LLM write the E-list?
Some of it. So
right.
I know Common Lisp, but not eLisp that well. So I had it right. Like I don't know all of the this is the thing that it's great for. Like, what is the API to move the cursor up to the beginning of the last mark in eLisp. Like, I don't know. I don't even know how to ask that question. Like how do you find this on the internet? But you just you type this sort of completely random thing, and it will give you what the API is. And so
Well, and also at least for me, and I guess I'm reviewing myself as okay, fine. Forget world peace. Welcome to Vimtown. As an eLisp, I actually don't want to know the answer. I do not want to crowd out any other fact in my brain with any eLisp. So if you could please give me this answer and I could just cut and paste it so I never have to see it, that would be great. I'm not it's things where I'm actually not curious about this. I'm a curious person. I'm interested in many things, but not this, not right now. So just give me the eLisp macro. It's gonna work.
Yeah, no, this is again another thing what these things are great for is just make it happen, please. I don't need to see how I don't want to know where the bodies are buried. Just make the thing happen.
Well, and I think so. So Adam, I know that you didn't ask me this question. I'm not. I don't want to sound hurt over it, but I guess I am a little. But as you know, I am of course living in my own filth with respect to this, and I've got no editor integration whatsoever. Maybe this is why the question was not asked. But so I use basically the web interface to ChatGPT is my kind of go-to. So I will say one of the advantages is, of course, it has your full history there, and Nicholas, I don't know if this is the kind of way you did this. I'm just I'm gonna just go through my history and see what I've been asking this thing. But your blog entry did prompt me to go back through my history, which I really haven't done. And God, I've asked it some and of course there's no context for some of the things I've asked it. So Adam, have I told you about this about asking ChatGPT life advice? I really recommend this. Have you done this at all?
I have to actually, and since Mike Caffarello is in the audience, I think we were talking about this when he was on. Now he's up on stage. But when he was on, you were talking about getting parenting advice, and he described it as giving the norm core answer, which I thought was just a great term and exactly what it's good for.
Well, and so I actually, in the spirit of that, and again, I've got no context around this, so I do not know. I actually need to figure out the exact date I asked this. But I apparently at some point asked in the last 30 days, asked ChatGPT for during a meal, what is the best time to bring up a potentially awkward subject? And it gave me, and this answer is extraordinary. It gave me an extremely good answer, but I'm like, what? ChatGPT, can you tell me why I asked you this? Why did I ask you this?
Seriously. Oh, that's wonderful.
I also asked it to explain. I've asked it to explain tweets to me. This is really pathetic.
You need a hotkey for that. You need your Chrome extension. Ask it to build you one.
Totally, a Chrome extension, like a yes, no. It actually, although that's said on tweets, of course, because anything that's got kind of internet and current and memey, it's gonna struggle, but it's also will be it will kind of give you some good places to go look. So sorry, Nicholas, I didn't mean to bring us down into the gutter here.
No, this is fine.
Hey guys, I have a question for Nicholas. How's it going?
Hey.
Hey, so Nicholas, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about in terms of using LLMs for coding, I do a lot of myself. In particular, I was happy to hear someone else is doing decompilation and annotation of the results. We've done a little bit of that ourselves, but there's one question I had, which was around marshaling the context. I think you answered this a little bit when you were talking about just sending to the LLM anything that you see currently in your Emacs window. One use case that I would like to do a lot of, but I don't really know how to do a great job of it, is when I'm in some project where most of the files that are relevant to some question are not in the editor window, or they're in some kind of repository. What I would like to have is some kind of system that maybe a controllable one will marshal the right headers or marshal the right just the right external docs to answer the question when I pose it. Have you played with this at all? Have you tried to be experimental or interesting in how you choose the evidence to provide to the model when you ask the question?
No, this is a great question. This is, I think, one of the cases where what I do is different enough for most people that I think, I haven't explored this, where the code that I tend to work with as research code is usually fairly small, self-contained kinds of projects where it's not, big, giant behemoth of things. And I think this is one of the areas where there's a large aspect of language models that doesn't need the models to become better for the things to become a lot more useful. And this is one of them. where I think there are now starting to be people who are making plugins for editors that try and do this. That like, you know, the model has a 100K context window. It can look at 100,000 roughly words, but like, you know, every token costs some amount of money to show the model. So like show the model the minimum amount of things so that you're not going to blow the budget on whatever you're making, but it still can answer your question. And like, how do you do this? Do you look at all of the recursive dependencies? That seems expensive. Maybe only one level deep. Maybe you try and be smart and ask the model, should I look at this file? You know, like there's lots of standard programming engineering that like takes this as a tool and tries to make things a lot better using this, that I think it's an entire area where I don't know. I'm surprised that there are not more startups that just are doing this now. Maybe they are and I haven't seen them, but like this as a direction of like take the model as a tool and build a big giant thing around it that uses the, for lack of a better word, like intelligence or, you know, like the ideas from the model and puts the rest of the programming stuff around it to make it have something interesting. Like I would really like to see more people doing this thing.
So I think Copilot, when you use Copilot in Visual Studio, or in Visual Code, like Copilot will give you different answers when you have different tabs open. So like if you have, you know, files A, B, and C loaded at the same time that you're working in window D, like it will use that evidence, but I don't think it's doing anything beyond that. So like there's something very basic going on there, but you'd like it to be a little smarter. Maybe you say like, as you say, like it follows dependencies to some distance. Maybe it goes and grabs like the recent test results or like last night's unit test or something like that. There's all sorts of clever stuff you could do. I'm not sure like what the absolute latest and greatest does, but there seems to be a lot of flexibility that's possible.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like, you know, this is definitely the case. What I have, looking back in 10 years, I will almost certainly cringe at like, you know, the like that's all you were doing. You were just like literally copying the entire text that was visible on the Emacs buffer and just like pasting that into the model. Why didn't you something more clever? But like, yeah, I'm sure that people will have a bunch of things that are doing this once they sort of get around to putting it all together. I just don't happen to be doing that right now.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that will actually really help. I mean, as practitioners, we're often in these big systems trying to make what seemingly simple small changes to large systems, which can often take too long because of the tedium. So, or just the need to comprehend the system. And the more we can get some help on that, and especially just like ramping up on a new system, can you help me comprehend this thing? Can you? I mean, I would love to be able to just like give it code bases and can you give me some design documentation for this? I mean, like, listen, if I give you the Python bytecode, you're able to give me the Python. Why can't you give me the design documentation from the system? That would be, I think, really, really helpful to the practitioner.
Yeah, I mean, they're starting to get close to this. I mean, like there used to be a technical limitation. You know, so last year or so, like the most you could fit into the models at a time was, I don't know, let's call it 1,000 lines of code, something like that. Now it's like, you know, 100,000. Like it's getting to be the case that these models technically support the ability to pass large amounts of input. The question is just we need people to start building the things that actually give the models the ability to do this in a way that is not enormously expensive. You know, it is not going to. And to be clear, the cost you should be comparing against is the cost that the person would have taken to do the thing. So, you know, if you could save a programmer who you're paying whatever salary you're paying an hour, like you should be willing to pay a reasonable fraction of that in LLM costs. I think people would be very aghast at doing this right now, but I feel like this will at some point people will become more used to this, but I feel like it will take some time for that to happen.
Yeah, and right now, anyway, you're able to use these things I feel like, all operating at a loss at some level. I mean, Adam, do you feel bad at all when you can see that it's really grinding on something? You're like, ugh, God, sorry, I'm just generating a lot of greenhouse gases on what is I'm asking you to do something. Because I mean, you can start uploading images and asking it to process it and do something. I mean, like you can really get it to start grinding.
I mean, when I start going on some tangents where I'm like, this is irresponsible. When I'm having it like generate images in the style of The Simpsons on a thing that I think would be funny, like to exactly me. Like, what am I doing? Like, not just with my life, but with everyone else's.
Totally. This is going to be like, I mean, obviously, Adam, you and certainly Mike and I are exactly the same vintage, where it's just like, you used to have Big Macs. You see, eat Big Macs out of styrofoam. Are you sure that's right? It's like, no, we did. No, I'm sure that's right. We definitely did, and I agree with you. It's like it does not make any sense at all. Are you really like you would have it just write poetry as Homer Simpson? Like, did you not realize the amount of society's precious resources that were being consumed?
I sort of
like,
did.
Well, we
kind
of knew.
Yeah,
right?
we
Exactly.
knew. We knew we were doing the wrong thing, but it was so funny. I mean, we thought it would be, but it wasn't actually. It wasn't that funny.
Yeah. So, Chris, do you have a question or a comment on how you've been using these things?
So I am definitely a self-proclaimed Copilot addict. Tab is my new favorite key in the editor. But a different use case, which I think I would like to inject, code completion is really cool, and that's like changed the game. A big one for me I have disabilities with my hands, but I feel like it's not talked about enough that the speech to text models combined with something like ChatGPT to do like post-processing and editing has been totally game-changing in terms of you can just say technical documentation and words and code editing, and it can do it like it's never done before. Like the step up, it's like a step function change from using Dragon or one of these other softwares. Really has been an incredible productivity boost.
And so when you say speech to text, is this your speech? Are you talking to it, or are you getting something else that's spoken and having that having it watch a presentation or what have you?
So this is like I'm speaking and it's producing the code, and then what you can do is hook this up. Yeah. That's pretty good, but it lacks a lot of like sentence structure and grammar sometimes, but it's pretty good. So then you can handcraft custom prompts that you then feed that through ChatGPT with like some macros, and then you get out like beautifully formatted text that's proper English, and it knows how to say all of your technical words, and you can even put in the prompt all of your technical company information in terms of like if I say something silly like this, like you correct it for me and do these kind of things. And so you can just in Slack or you're writing documents for work, you can just start recording, ramble for 2 minutes, and get like a couple nice, really succinct paragraphs that are edited for you.
Yeah, that's amazing. And is this so? I gotta say, Adam, are you comfortable talking to the computer?
I'm getting there. It's weird. I'm more comfortable talking to ChatGPT on my phone for whatever reason than I would be sitting at my desk talking to my computer.
Because I am not at that. I mean, this may be a generational thing, and I may need because my kids are extremely comfortable talking to. I mean, the number of things that they are even though they complain about Siri, for example, they still use it all of the time. And so I think that so I think that's it. I need to start living in the future, or at least the present.
Have you tried the ChatGPT like interactive audio mode on the phone?
I haven't. Have you? You were raving about that, right? You tried that.
Raving in a way. So when Simon was on the show, he was talking about he'd go for these long walks with his dog, and when he'd get back to his desk, would have Simon's in the audience, but I'm gonna hyperbolize and say thousands of lines of code written, whatever. So I was taking the dogs for a walk like the night after that show, or maybe the night that same night, and ended up getting into a 45-minute argument with ChatGPT about JSON schema and like trying to prove some incongruence that it was insisting was true. So I'm not raving about that experience necessarily, but I've had other good ones where for doing actually doing some trip planning and some travel planning, it's been terrific and had a good interaction with it.
Is it less apologetic? Because normally I feel like it backs down. In speech, is it like, hey, listen, asshole, if you wanted the answer, why are you asking? You're asking me for the answer. I'm going to give you the answer.
It does back down. I think I've gotten into some of these situations where like either I'm not being firm enough with it, where I'm trying to prove it wrong, or I'm just giving it too much rope, but it just digs in its heels. I had another one. I think I told you this where, again, I think it was last time, Nicholas, you were on, you were describing some use of LLMs, and I decided I was going to have an LLM write the show notes, because writing the show notes for these podcasts is kind of a pain in the neck for me. And it totally gaslit me. It said, wow, this is a really long transcript. It's going to take me several hours to do this, but it's going to take a little while, but I'll go work on it. I'll let you know as soon as possible. And I thought, oh, wow, that's terrific. So do I need to do anything else? I asked, and said, no, I'm good.
I'm good. Yeah.
And I said, how
They
long?
will.
Yeah, and I said, how long is it going to take? It's like, well, it's going to take a while. The
It's gonna take
next
a long
morning,
while.
the next morning I checked in, and I was like, how'd it go? Like, where
How'd what go?
is it going to be done? And then it just explained, like, I don't work like that. Like, I don't work when you're not here. You think I'm working when you're not here? No, I
It's like
am call and response. What did you think I was doing exactly?
the night manager told me I should check in the morning. Like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
My shift started at 8. I can tell you that no one would tell you that.
Yeah, I said, I must clarify that as an AI developed by OpenAI, I don't have the capability to perform real-time processing or analysis that takes hours or days. It's like, why didn't you tell me that last night, buddy? Like,
Was it
anyway,
apologetic then?
God,
This is great.
It said, I must clarify. I don't detect an apology in there. I feel like it's kind of.
God, that sounds like an apology letter written by me. That's like this reads more like a clarification than an apology. It's like more like you're restating your position more emphatically. That's so what was that on? Was that on GPT-4 or
I think it was 4.0.
4.0, yeah, because I think with these other, maybe we're trying, because that would be so helpful to have it. And I mean, we must be close on, because one thing I had not tried. Have you tried uploading RFDs to it and getting it to?
No, I haven't done that. This is the Oxide request for discussion, where we go on sometimes briefly, but sometimes at great length on focused topics.
Yeah, I maybe because I honestly, Nicholas, some of these examples just caught me off guard in terms of the amount of things you were giving it. I just don't think I realized that the windows were this large. This
is the thing I just think people should try. Is like, just, I wonder if it can do this thing. Well, let's give it in a couple examples, and if it turns out that it does a thing great for you, then great. You've learned a new thing. If it turns out that it doesn't, then like accept the fact that the tool is imperfect, and wait for the next one and try again. And like, I'm sure this will be one of these things. I'm not looking forward to this, where people who grow up with these are so much better at just like knowing and trusting that like which kinds of things these models can do, which kinds of things that they can't. Where like, I have to like remind myself now, like, this is a task that seems like it should be easy, but I don't want to do it. I should ask the model and see if it gives me the right answer. It's like, that's not my natural response right now. I have to like remind myself to do this. And I'm sure that people who are growing up with these things will treat this as like just another tool that any of us would immediately jump to, instead of just open the debugger, the first reaction, let's ask the model. And like this kind of thing. And, maybe it's wrong, maybe it's not, but I think this is a thing I think people should do more just to get experience. Like, yeah, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't.
Well, I think that's a very good point in that, because this is like the way I watch my kids use Siri all the time without frustration, because they've got a very good intuition for the kinds of things that it can do and the kinds of things that it can't. Whereas anytime I interact with like where I'm speaking, I feel like, have you seen the scene from Curb Your Enthusiasm where Larry David is interacting with Siri?
Yes.
I'm going to drop a link to that in the chat. I mean, I feel like this is all of my interactions with Siri are just end in absolute combat. And I think, Nicholas, you're making a very good point in terms of that rising generation. There's been a lot of concern that like, oh God, LLMs just do everything. So, we're going to be the helpless Charlie Brown heads in James Mickens' classic parlance. Whereas I actually think that what folks that are kind of growing up with this or coming into software engineering with this are actually much better at viewing it as a tool. And my kids used, and my 17-year-old ended up with getting a paid GPT account because he's like, GPT-3 is, I'm actually asking these things frequently enough that I actually am really seeing the material differences between GPT-4 and GPT-3, and not just to cheat on schoolwork.
Not merely
to do that, and not merely, I think I've said this here before, but if I haven't, I guess I'm going to out him for writing Nextdoor posts and trolling Nextdoor with which, I mean, admittedly, like, it is so good at that. If you ask it to write a Nextdoor post as an indignant adult about a ridiculous issue, it's so good at it, and it gets so much reaction that
quite a corpus there.
Oh, and I mean, like the teenagers literally got bored with it. They're just like, "This is I'm fishing in a stock pond. Like, there's just no sport to this. This is not actually that interesting." Thank God, because I mean, we had at one point they were just like showing me next door posts. It's like this post has got 50,000 engagements. I'm like, oh my God. Okay, yeah. So I mean, but they're really integrating it into their lives in ways that does not feel like I mean, it really feels like it's much more in the spirit, Nicholas, of your post of like really using it as a tool. And for us, like, I mean, Adam, when was the point where you really needed a search engine to write code? I mean, because I was like a little bit
like when, like every day.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? I don't know.
No, but like when in your career, like that obviously that didn't start in the 90s. I mean, you weren't writing a code using Hotbot, right? I mean, it's like or like or whatever. But it was like I feel like by pretty early 2000s. I mean, by 2010, I don't know.
I think 2010. That feels like for sure. I mean, it was part. I remember doing. I was running interview process, hiring folks, and the question came up around that time, like, well, why do we expect people to have memorized all of these APIs, right? Like, I don't memorize these APIs. You like the search engine is part of your development process. Like, why would you test someone's ability to write these things in a way that is totally unnatural for the way they actually operate?
Totally. And where it's like, I would use a search engine for this. It's like, well, yeah use an LLM for that. Yeah. No, that's interesting. I mean, it does really, in terms of how it changes the hiring process.
Yeah. Nicholas, reading your post on this topic, it made me think, how should we be teaching differently? Whether it's CS or
this is
generally.
a very hard question.
Totally.
I do not envy the current academics who have to teach.
No, and some of it's totally taught. Like, I see this through my own, recent high school graduate where, he's like, well, half the class is just cheating all the time. And he has a English teacher who, pretty aggressive, but the way her answer to it was everyone writes by hand in my classroom, right? She doesn't accept papers that were turned in overnight or whatever. It's just all the writing is live and all the reading is at home. So there are certainly some reactions, but I guess really what I was thinking of was with regard to computer science curricula. How does it change? Like, what are you teaching differently? What kind of skills are change?
I mean, this is an excellent question. I think no more qualified to answer this than anyone else. But I think, if I had to give a speculation for an answer, I would say this is the kind of thing where it's hard to know because, why do we teach, young kids how to like add and multiply? We don't do it because this is a thing you're going to have to do in your daily lives. Like the reason you do this is to teach them the rigor of mathematics and like all these kinds of things where you teach people to do things not because you want to teach them that skill, but because having learned that skill has made you better at being able to do other kinds of things. And I do worry that it's possible that it will be important to learn how to program, not because this is something that we expect that you will be doing every single day, but because the clarity of thought and the ability to debug something depends on your ability to have written it. On the other hand, maybe it turns out that what you need to teach people is how do you interact with the models, how do you debug code when the model gets stuck, and like maybe it's okay if people don't know how to write something completely from scratch, but are okay jumping into a code base that they didn't write and just like fixing the problems. I really don't know. I think this is one of these very uncertain questions that a lot of people who I work with are going to have to figure out because they're the ones who are actually teaching the students. But I fortunately am not doing that.
Let me suggest a third path because I feel that, and back when, especially when we were doing a lot of university recruiting, you would see really strong contrasts in undergraduate curricula based on how lab intensive they were. And, Adam, you and I are blessed with an alma mater that always had a philosophy of being very lab intensive. And I feel like it always showed. In order to be lab intensive, I mean, Adam, talk about like tedious, monotonous code, TA code. And all of for those lab intensive courses, there were undergraduate TAs that were doing a heroic amount of work to allow the course to be lab intensive. It's really hard to make a course that's lab intensive. And, one thing I might suggest is like, hey, maybe these LLMs allow a lot more courses to be a lot more lab intensive.
Yeah.
And allow people, because I do think, Nicholas, to your point, I think that when you debug these systems, you are forced to learn it. And so let's get a lot more aggressive about what we expect undergraduates to do from a lab perspective, and really do this stuff, make this stuff on their own. And then I feel like there's never been an excuse, especially with, you're kind of paying a top dollar price, and you should be able for your undergraduate education, and you should be able to demand real intense labs. I think this gives us an opportunity to build those labs on the cheap, and I think that you could actually do a lot more. And we should have higher expectations for those courses in terms of having students do way, way, way more, and giving them the apparatus where they can go do it. I mean, Adam, I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's a great perspective. And I think you're right that we were blessed to have gone to a very fancy school that was able to provide these things, but do LLMs democratize that significantly? I mean, even beyond the way that information has been democratized in the last 25, 30 years since we were going to school, does it make it so much more approachable for any school to replicate that, or for folks to do that outside of a school environment?
Totally.
Yeah, this is one of the things where, just like the ability to scale up some of these things is something I'm very excited about. I'm a little cautious on. I don't know to what extent I would fully trust these things to actually be good teachers in some way, or like some people are very excited by this. Andre Karpathy, I think, is recently just like his who. Very important ML person, but who has recently started like something where he's trying to do ML for teaching, and I know that Khan Academy is trying to do this too. And I think like if it works, it could work very, very well. It could also work very poorly. We'll see how that whole thing goes. But I guess one of the things I am very excited about for programming in particular, is it's really hard to get new people into programming when with the complexity of all the things you have to do to make something that looks interesting today. Like imagine 30 years ago, like you could do so like you could write a text engine, like a little text game that like people would find fun. Like like it doesn't like require crazy stuff. Now if you want to like write something that like looks exciting, like it's like legitimately very hard, where like it's gonna be hard to get people interested and like show them like a fun demo that they can actually make. One of the things I'm very excited about the opportunity for is like you could imagine showing people who don't know that much about programming but like can like express like, make me a game that does this kind of thing.
Totally.
Like, help me, like I want to make the person have a weird hat, like give them a weird hat, like, and they can like get interested in doing the thing, and then it will get stuck, and then they'll have to start having to figure out like, okay, now yes. I have my thing, like my idea is on the screen. Now I just need to like start making small little tweaks to it to make things better. And like this is how I got into programming.
Yeah,
is like both my parents are programmers, and like my father would like have some program that he would help me write, which basically meant he would write. And then like I would like make small little tweaks to like I found amusing as a little kid, and like I from there I could like actually, it gave me a reason to want to write a larger program. And like not everyone has parents who can do this for them, and like the ability of just like getting the first version of a thing that like gets people just like, even if they can't do anything more after that, just like excited by the idea that they can have a program that the computer can do a thing for them. Like this is a thing that I think I'm very hopeful will be a thing that works.
100%. And I think it gets us back to an era that Adam and I really came up in, where it's like my first programs, like actually many of my generation were from Enter Magazine, where you had a basic program that was a game and you would literally, I mean, you would type the basic program in and you would get the free game. You'd get the Space Invaders or whatever. And when it was broken, you had to figure out why. And, I don't think anyone was concerned like, oh my God, like, the youth of today are just going to, when you're on the job, are you just going to be waiting for the next Enter Magazine to, and I think, but you were able to build something. So Nicholas, just exactly your point, like the ability, because I think we did go through this era, and one of my concerns, honestly, with the Chromebook, as great as the Chromebook is, is that it's kind of impenetrable by design. And the idea of actually allowing these LLMs to go build something fanciful for a kid that they're going to find interesting, and then they're like, okay, I want to tweak this, so I need to understand it a little bit better. I mean, I've tried to, your children are much more intrinsically motivated, Adam, but I've always felt that if I could somehow get getting the Wi-Fi password as like an escape room that would also teach them something in the process. Do you know what I mean? Or like
that's your proof of work. Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. Or like the other thing, like whenever we get a new device in the house, my kids race to the parental controls to lock me out. So basically, if you don't discover your parental controls, your teenagers will discover it for you. And then the next thing you know, you're asking their permission to change, like, wait a minute, what happened here? I think that this allows us to kind of cut through those layers of abstraction and show how stuff works. And I also think then getting individual help. And you mentioned this, Nicholas, in your post about, as a tutor, Sal Khan has got a terrific piece on this. And I'm going to drop in, I'll drop in a link to his TED Talk on it. But Sal Khan talking about how this can completely revolutionize tutoring. And if you've got someone who needs additional help, and I mean, just being able to iterate, I think it's quite possible that this is going to really uplift way more people.
Especially from the perspective of like, how many people have a question and don't ask it because they think they're going to make themselves look stupid.
Totally.
And but you can just ask the computer now. Like the computer's not going to judge you. It's going to be very this is one of the cases it's nice that it's apologetic. You ask for an answer and you say, I don't understand. It's going to go, oh, sorry. Let me try and explain it to you another way. And you can just keep saying, I don't understand it. It will be entirely pleasant.
It will continue to blame itself. It will at no point be like, Jesus Christ, you're thick. I mean, come on.
Right. And this ability of I do this for many things where it's like, here's a very basic question. I don't know the answer. I'm sure that this is entirely trivial. Help me understand this thing that I don't get it. And just you can just ask, and you have to be a little careful because they're currently in a world where, you can say, help me explain this thing, and it may just lie to you. But I'm hopeful that as they get better, they will do this less. And also it's true that for easier things, they do this much less. And yeah, no, I'm very optimistic about this as a thing that will just allow people to ask questions that they want because they don't understand something very simple, and they don't want to bother someone. A lot of these questions, when I've been doing some electronic stuff, and the last time I did electronics was 2009 or something. I don't know. There's so much stuff that I don't know that is entirely trivial. Any person who studied electronics in the world can answer this. And at the same time, I'm not going to call someone up and be like, so I have this resistor and it says 601 on it. What does that mean?
Right.
But I could, I know someone who knows the answer, but I'm not going to do this. That's just why would I no one does this. But now you can just ask the model, here's this incredibly dumb question. Just tell me what the answer is. I'm sure that this is easy and it's known. Just help me out here. And they're great for that.
Right, absolutely terrific. And I also think, and actually, Adam, I'm just going through my own history. And I had forgotten that I had done this. Is that I did actually upload an entire RFD I'd written, and I asked for its comments on it.
Nice.
And it gave me some pretty thoughtful comments. And I mean, I disagreed with some of the thing. It gave me comments in a direction that I kind of disagreed with. So I kind of explained, no, those would be fine comments, but here's why we're kind of asking for this. And it's no, that makes sense. And it gave me different feedback that was, I thought, it was good. I mean, it was, I don't think it was life-changing feedback, but it wasn't hallucinating. And I think it's it allowed me to write effectively better docs, or get a doc that was tighter, getting more eyes on it. Right. I also did, I guess I should have done this earlier. Man, my chat GPT-4 history is definitely wild. I feel like it's even weirder than my search history. At one point, Adam, we talk about determining NICs to use in the Oxide rack. NIC is a network interface card, and we our colleague Robert Bastaki wrote a terrific RFD called the 4 NICs of the Apocalypse. Broadcom being war, of course. I think Intel was pestilence. Marvel, I can't remember what Mellanox was, and Chelsea was famine. But at one point, I actually wondered, like, what are the additional NIC vendors? And I did the thing that there are just not many companies that make enterprise grade NICs, high speed NICs. I did the thing that's, and I was actually wondering if you do this at all, Nicholas, a technique that Simon talked about is like the name 10 more. And then you just keep saying like name 10 more, name 10 more, name 10 more.
Did it start making up NIC vendors?
Oh, and then it gets so deep into weirdness. I mean, it's great. It's just like at no point is it like, look, pal,
there are not 10 more.
There are not 10 more. Like that's not actually a reasonable request. You're like, okay, here I go. And it's pulling things that are like, wow, yeah, that's a super obscure company that actually has been out of business for 5 years. But I don't know, because do you use that technique?
No, definitely. This is the thing they all the time of like, here's the thing. I do this. So I do this a lot for writing paper titles now. Like titling papers is like, it's such a hard problem because like on one hand, I want to be descriptive. On the other hand, I want it to be something people are going to want to click on, but I don't want it to be clickbait. So like, I'll just like I'll give it the abstract of the paper I've written and like 4 or 5 titles and be like, just give me 50 paper titles. And I'm not going to like take any of them probably, but like I just want to like see like what's it going to come up with, and like the first couple are going to be like almost exactly what I've written but like slightly different, and at some point it'll come up with something that like it's a little interesting, and then I'll like have seen just like more ideas, and then I'll close it and I'll go write the ones that I want and come up with a thing that I want. But yeah, no, this is I guess one of the cases where I found it's really useful for like a very obscure use case, but like is helpful for me. But I do this all the time for these kinds of things where you want it to give you an answer to a thing, but the first couple are going to be just like boring and generic, and so you just ask it for like a large number of them, and by the 40th it's like really going off in the wild and coming up with some truly crazy things. But if that's what you want, I think this is a great use case for that.
Yeah. Okay. So then another question for you, of course, and I think you mentioned this even in the piece, that you use the LLM to kind of write some of the apparatus for the blog entry. Did you use the LLM at all as part of writing the blog entry?
I don't. 2 reasons why. One is I like, so for writing code, oftentimes I just want it to be correct. And right. I don't care about the style of it because I'm going to get rid of the code pretty quickly anyway or whatever. But for writing, like I want a particular tone and a particular voice to be consistent throughout. And so because of that, I still want to write all of the words myself. But that is something I think like models are not yet good enough at, that they could become better at. But like I'm sure that they'd be just fine in lots of contexts where you just want it to like, you just need text. But like for many of these things, like I care about how it sounds, especially for text that I'm going to put online. Like I want people to be engaged with it, and I think I have a good idea of what people are going to find interesting and not get bored by, and so I want to do that. But at the same time, what I will do, is this question of, here is what I just wrote.
Yeah, what do you think?
Tell me some things that a random person on the internet might be confused by, which is like, so I tend to write mostly on security or on machine learning, and so I will one of the things I will do when I'm trying to attract both people is I will copy and paste my thing and then say, you are a regular computer security researcher. Tell me what machine learning words are confusing to you, because I will just use things that like are obvious to me now because I forgot that I learned them, and I'll do the exact same question, repeat the question, but just say you're the other person what things are confusing to you. And like I find this can be very helpful. Occasionally I write things that where I've broken something, and I'll ask like, how's the tone of this? Like, am I being nasty, or like is this like okay?
Interesting.
Like because like it's completely devoid from like any of my feelings. It will tell me like like you're probably taking it too far. Like, because I don't want to be mean, but like it can be hard to like tell. It's like I can do this before I go ask some friends to read it for me and just like get like an objective. Like it has no skin in the game here. Like it's sort of like it will tell me what if the tone of this is off.
It gives you advice that's terrible or that you disagree with, you just disregard it. I mean, I think
exactly
using it
right. You know,
as
like,
an editor is a really good use of it.
Yeah.
right. Like occasionally, like everything that I write, it always tells me you mix text that is both too formal and not and too casual, and I'm like,
go to hell.
Yeah, I know. Like the reason why is because in the introduction I'm being casual, and then I slip into like academic writing mode in the middle, and I'm like, this is not important enough for me that I'm going to go and make the entire thing completely consistent. But like, yeah, like if you don't like it, you ignore it. But like, you know, at least it tells me the thing. And like, you know, another example where I did something that I knew was going to be like, and the model told me, you know, some people might not like this, and then inevitably there was a comment online somewhere, someone who complained about exactly that thing, and like I knew that they were going to not like it, and like I don't care, just like this is the way the thing is I've made my decision. But yeah, for lots of other things, it will like find cases of things where I could have said things unclear or those things like this, and yeah, I find it useful for that. Not as useful for coding for me, but you know, maybe this is also a fact of like I use it mostly for coding, so I know how to use it for that. Like I think it'd be very interesting to ask someone who writes if they find tricks that work for them in particular. Like what is the equivalent of boring writing for someone who does something like this, where they would actually find it interesting. I don't know what that would be, but yeah.
It's a great middle ground that you're describing, just in terms of still having it be your own craftsmanship, right? Your own tending of your garden while still getting that feedback. It reminds me a little bit of I don't know if you guys have been watching the Olympics at all, but Google has this awful ad where it's saying, you know, Gemini is going to help my daughter write a letter to her hero. And it just drives me bananas.
Oh,
like,
but I thought I seen all of the awful ads at the Olympics. I've definitely watched the
man.
Olympics. I read this like nonstop ads, and and they are also non-stop AI ads.
Nonstop.
Oh my god, the IBM AI ad is terrible. The Reuters AI ad is terrible. I love like they have these ads where we're talking about how AI can revolutionize their business, and they're using. It's like they literally should have used AI to generate the ad. It would have generated a better ad. Because like you got people in the office that have got like this 3-ring binder that are looking at. It's like, oh, you know what? Like before we get to AI, how will you just bring the information age to your office? Like actually, I've got some ideas. I've got some other ideas. So this is a Gemini. It's a Google Gemini ad. I think Google ads are generally pretty good. But this one is not. This is bad.
I mean, it's sort of like well crafted, but the premise of having, you know, your daughter craft a letter to their hero using Gemini, I just find gross. I just find
that is gross. That is the worst possible ad.
Yeah, there you go. It's a winner.
I also want to like. Now I'm really curious. I really don't want to. I don't want to know if I want to ask my kids who their heroes are. I'm going to be. I mean, I know like for the 17-year-old, it's going to be some UFC person I've never heard of. But I'll have to ask the 12-year-old who her hero is. But yeah, that is not a very good use of that. Which sucks because, you know, Nicholas. I mean, I think as you pointed out, like there are so many good uses for this stuff. And I think the other thing that I would just add on that is because especially, you know, I think we can see the hype cycle really turning on this quickly. And we're going to see we are going to see companies disappear for sure. It looks a lot like the .com bust, I think. And I think that, you know, when we're talking about, you know, all of the things that you talked about, like how many of those would you pay for a startup to build something for you on? At least for me, I look at those and I'm like, not many, honestly. Like actually what I'm paying for is I'm going to pay OpenAI or I'm going to pay for Mistral or what have you. I'm going to pay for like one of these models to use. That's definitely money well spent. But I like beyond that, no thanks. Like the power of this thing is that I can use it to build up the things. So there's going to be a bit of an extinction event here.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's hard for me to. Again, I'm not the person who has the most intelligent take on this, but this is hard to believe that like the only way that things can go is up. I think lots of people like to say that I mean, we've already seen this. Of so many people say this thing is using AI, and it turns out nope, they just hired a bunch of people and told them to do the thing. Right. And like, it's just like it bothers me when they do this because all it means is the people who wanted to not like it just point out this is another case where the thing has like not actually delivered. And, you know, it's just like, tell me when you do the thing, actually, give me the actual use cases. But the problem is, like, a lot of the use cases are just not yet as glamorous as they want. And, like, no one's going to run an ad of like, watch this person write code a little faster because it did this thing that was boring for them.
Oh, it's like, did you see that lovely Google ad where the little girl wanted her Python bytecode to be rewritten in terms of NIF's assembly? That was so touching. I mean, it was like,
right. And so like a bunch of what people try and talk about is like some aspirational, like this is what the future might be, or here's like a fun thing that like might be, and then people just look at it and go like, but that's not what I actually want out of it. And it's like, it's very hard to pitch some of these things. And, you know, in the same way, you know, same thing as like the internet, you know, 25 years ago or whatever. Like I truly imagine that these things will become a lot better, but sometimes it can be hard to really pitch the value.
And in the dot-com bust, you know, there were a lot of things that happened in the dot-com boom that made no economic sense that actually did make sense in the limit. And there were a lot of things that were, you know, the idea that you would, you know, have groceries delivered to you or have pet food delivered to you, and seemed, you know, with Webvan or Pets.com, but now we do that today. And so I think for people should not confuse the coming bust for the technologies themselves not being useful, because I think, as you pointed out, they are useful today. If you're not using them in your workflow, you should be. Nicholas, I loved your advice about you should be get over your skis a little bit. Ask it to do something that is beyond its capabilities, so you know where the capabilities lie. I think that is very, very good advice. Well, Nicholas, this has been awesome. This is a great blog entry. We love it when thank you so much for being willing to join us here. And it was a lot of fun to see that discussed yesterday. I got to tell you, I really appreciated it because I was very off the grid. I was backpacking with the scouts last week on the John Muir Trail. So I actually like, God, what are we going to talk about on Monday? And I'm like, oh, thank God, Nicholas wrote a blog entry. Oh God, please. I hope he's willing to come on Oxide and Friends. Oh, thank God he is. Oh, thank God. So really, really appreciate it. I will say, by the way, just on that note, I did ask ChatGPT on the ascent routes on a particular. We climbed Split Mountain, which is a 14er here in California, and do not ask these large language models routes of ascent. I mean, it gives you it very confidently gives you information that is absolutely wrong, that if you were to not look at your eyes or not look at a map, you would actually potentially die. So for those of you following along at home, the south summit of Split Mountain is actually highly technical. It is not a walk up. So the north summit is the walk up. That's what I'd like to say. So LLMs, please interpret my speech and get it right. But Nicholas, thank you very much.
Sure, of course. No, it's great to talk about these kinds of things. It's nice to try and get people to sort of understand some amount of middle ground on these things, that you know, they have utility, but they're not perfect. But you know, maybe they'll be better in the future. But at least like try and you, like, as programmers, we should try and use whatever tools we have. And you know, there was a time when people like, you're using a garbage collected language, you're not managing your own memory. And I feel like this is the same thing that you're going to hear. Like, there are going to be people who are going to be like, saying like, you should never use a language model, you know, only write code that like you have personally, you know, verified correct, and like, you know, have done like all of the things like by hand. And you know, someone else is going to be using the model, and they'll be doing the things a lot faster. And you know, in some cases it's true that you want to do it by hand, but in other cases you'll be good enough to just ask the model to write it for you. And I feel like this is like the next version of that kind of thing happening.
Totally. Well, thank you again for joining us. Adam, thank you as well. And good to be able to wedge GNU plot into yet another episode of Oxide and Friends.
Yep, thanks.
Always.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you next time.